To order, yeah, everybody should put on their microphones. We do have a quorum present, more than enough to make a decision if it comes to that. First item of business would be to approve the draft minutes of the September 5th, September 10th, and September 23rd meetings or joint meetings of P&Z and Council. Have you all received copies of those minutes? And have you any comments, questions, revisions, corrections associated therewith?
I had a question. It's going to take me a moment to find it, however. From the minutes having to do with the hospital. Remind me of the date, Alex.
September 5th.
I'm sorry?
That's September 5th.
Okay. All right, I'm not going to find it, but I just want, there was a vote, not a vote, there was a straw poll taken, and I was wondering if Cindy's opinion was properly reflected.
No, it was not.
Okay, that is on, I found it. No, I didn't.
It's on page 3 of September 23rd, not September 5th.
No wonder I couldn't find it. Yeah,
That was Joel's request
Okay.
for 6-story buildings.
all
And I
right.
did not support that. Sorry, Joel.
All right, let's look at it one by one. September 5th, anybody have any questions or comments about that one? I do on page 4 or 5, actually page 5 of 5. I did not vote. I believe that would be Mrs. Rothstein in my place. September 10th, any comments or revisions?
I had one on September 5th. Paragraph 7, at the bottom, if you go up from paragraph 8, it says, Board Member Paul Roberts asked, how far out do they plan ahead for the plantings? Basically, I think my question at the time had nothing to do with planting any type of vegetation. It was how far out they plan for patient loads. So it was, how far out are they looking? Because the debate was about the square footage, the size, and how long that size of cancer patient facility was going to be able to sustain the anticipated population that required it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Kelly, you have those comments? September 10th?
On the September 10th, Joel is listed as present and absent, and I don't think he can be both.
He's been known to be in two places at once.
Were you there? I think he was.
I'm sorry?
This is the meeting, the joint meeting between council and P&Z. Were you at that meeting?
There. I was here. It doesn't sound like I'm here today, though, but I was there for that, yeah. Sorry, I was reading something.
Any other changes or comments about the September 10th special meeting? All right, now September 23rd.
I just have the one change on page 3. I did not support, and it says that I did support.
Okay, we would need a motion to approve the draft minutes of the September 5th, September 10th and September 23rd meetings with corrections. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve all draft meeting minutes with corrections.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, Kelly.
Well, I'll abstain from the ones where I wasn't present, because I don't think it's appropriate that so I was only there on the 5th, so I vote to recommend approval of those.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is new business. And since there is no new business that the board has to consider other than a public hearing, I need a motion to recess the regular meeting to enter public hearing number 1.
So moved?
Motion by David Kelly, seconded by
Second.
Cindy Burnett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are now in public hearing number 1 for the application concerning Pinehurst South Cottages. Alex, would you be so kind as to introduce the application?
Gladly, thank you. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider an official zoning map amendment. And this particular map amendment includes 2 parcels of land consisting of approximately 41.26 acres, further identified as Moore County parcel ID numbers 000-46241 and 000-46287, and would zone those properties RMF CD for residential multifamily conditional district. The properties are currently zoned NC for neighborhood commercial district and R5 high-density residential district. The proposed use of the properties is a 160 dwelling unit single-family development with amenities. The property is currently vacant. The applicant is the Cottages at Legacy Lakes LLC, and the property owners are Lisa Mahaley and Howard and Georgia Arnett. I can attest that the properties were properly posted and the dual notice was sent and advertised in the paper of local circulation. Included with this application for map amendment were the applicable application of a general concept plan and the zoning map amendment, a project narrative. A neighborhood meeting was required by the definition of the PDO, and those summary of those minutes are also included within your packet. Trip generation was provided, hydrant flow test, ISO calculations, a biological assessment for the red cockaded woodpecker active partition area, the general concept plan, and elevations. As you can see, the surrounding properties adjacent to the subject parcels do contain a few multiple zoning designations and consist of some built-upon area. It's also adjacent to the railroad right-of-way along Highway 5. To the north is Blake Boulevard and some of the office buildings and the commercial areas that are there. To the east and south are some of the lots there to the that entrance of CCNC, which is emergency access entrance only off Olivia Lane. The applicant is proposing a few conditions associated with this development. One condition is that the side setback of the parent tract be 20 feet as opposed to the required 15-foot side setback. They are imposing a condition to provide a 10-foot wide Class 1 planted buffer along the common property line of the adjacent properties zoned neighborhood commercial and office and professional. They also condition providing a minimum of 10-foot separation between the buildings. The applicant has also petitioned for voluntary annexation to the village's corporate limits, allowance for up to 160 dwelling units, and the use of valley gutter in lieu of the curb and gutter requirement per the village's detail in the engineering standards and specifications manual. After holding the public hearing on the matter, the Planning and Zoning Board must, if they decide to act, adopt a statement of consistency with the current 2010 Long-Range Comprehensive Plan and send a recommendation of approval recommend approval with conditions or recommend denial to village council. The planning staff actually recommends that the planning board make two separate motions on those, one motion being to adopt the statement of consistency and a separate motion to recommend action to village council on the proposed amendment. In reference to the use of the valley gutter instead of the curb and gutter requirement, the village's public services and engineering director does seem that that is warranted with this request due to the amount, if the proposal were to be approved, the amount of driveway cuts that would be associated with that type of development. But the engineering standards and specifications manual do state that a waiver must be obtained by village council, so hence the request and the condition that is included with this particular proposal. The applicants have also indicated that a traffic impact analysis was currently being prepared at the time of submittal and that data was being collected. I'll let the applicant speak to that and where that stands whenever we open the floor up for them. Also, as you'll see, we have 3 elevations that were submitted as part of this that you guys can see on your screen in front of you and are also included in your packets. The applicant's proposing some stormwater management area at the southeast portion of the property and in areas in the northern section shown on the general concept plan. Public water and sewer are available to the area, and this conceptual plan has been viewed with Moore County Public Utilities as well as the rest of the Technical Review Committee, and they have given minor comments to the applicants and have determined that at the conceptual stage that this plan is compliant with all the applicable regulations.
Thank you. Before we get into the actual business at hand, I have to ask if any member of the board has any conflict associated with this application or anyone associated with the application.
No.
Thank you. We can now proceed. And the applicant is on the clock. So please present your case. Also, the sign-up sheet that was on the back table indicated a total of 8 people, but I believe 5 of those 8 are associated with the application. I have Robert Coates, Marguerite Ingram, and Joshua Renicky is with the application. Mr. Paserno is with the application. Mr. Bramwell is the other individual who signed up to speak. Are there any other people in the audience that would like to sign up or speak toward this application? Okay, I guess we can go ahead then.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Tim Carpenter with LKC Engineering. We're representing the applicant. We also have Marcel Gannot, who is the applicant. We have Josh Rinke with Ramey Kemp and Associates, a traffic engineer, and Philip Paserno, also with LKC Engineering. So we'll get started. We prepared a presentation, and we'll try not to be too repetitive in data, but we have a lot of data to present. So again, it's Pinehurst South Cottages, the applicant being Cottages at Legacy Lakes LLC. So this slide is a representative of just the overall site map. So you'll see the site location, CCNC to the east, Olivia Lane to the south, Highway 5, and then the existing Pinehurst South development and Blake Boulevard to the north. So just a little bit of site background. Again, the area to the north we're bordered by Blake Boulevard, and to the south we're bordered by Olivia Lane, East Highway 5. Site acreage consists of 2 tracts. It's a 28-acre tract that's currently zoned neighborhood commercial, excuse me, and a 13-acre tract that's zoned R5 residential. The topography generally slopes from the west to the east. Elevations range from about 540 to 510. Current use of the site is wooded with a mix of hardwoods and pines. Environmental features on site, we've confirmed, we had an environmental consultant, Dr. J. Carter and Associates. We've confirmed that while we are in a couple of clusters of the RCW, SOPI 108 and also SOPI 69-1-113 and 54, we got a clean finding of no impact on that. And then we had a site assessment relative to wetlands, and no wetlands exist on site. We do, however, have a piece of the Drowning Creek watershed on the western side of the property to which we'll be applying for the non-intensity allocation, as it's stated in the condition. So this is just a shot of the overall zoning map. I'm sure everybody on the board is familiar with this. Our site down to the south, adjacent to Olivia Lane, I don't know if that pops up there, where the red dot is, represents the zoning and the surrounding zoning. So in general, the next slide, Phil. In general, in a zoomed-in view, we have some rather intense zoning district in and around the site, including the sites. We have the R5, office professional, neighborhood commercial. To the west, we have residential multifamily, and also to the northwest, there's a couple pods of that. And then we have office professional across Highway 5 and Trotter Hills. And then due north is the Pinehurst South site. So under the current zoning, neighborhood commercial and R5, we took the liberty of doing a conceptual plan that kind of explained what the possible uses could be. And as you all know, your neighborhood commercial district is probably your broadest zoning district with the most allowable uses. So as we did this, we took probably, I guess what you would consider maybe the most intense use, and the drawing that you see in front of you represents about 100 plus or minus 180,000 square feet of neighborhood commercial, something which is a mix of commercial, retail, shopping, et cetera. And then to the southeast, in the R5 zoning district, we also did a concept plan there that represents approximately 50 units. Both of them with the primary entrance being on Blake. And then I'll speak to Olivia Lane for just a second. On the next slide that you'll see, when we flip to it, you'll see an emergency connection coming off a cul-de-sac, accessing what is now an emergency connection on Olivia Lane. We don't know the status of Olivia Lane right now. There are some opportunities or chances that might end up being a public street, but we have not made that assumption for the purpose of this. So talking about neighborhood commercial, as we develop this plan, some examples, and not all of the examples because there are too many to list, allowable uses, general retail, restaurant, bar, tavern, medical clinic, theaters, daycare, studios, recycling station. You can see just from that list, it's a really broad zoning district. And again, the 13 acres of the R5 on the southeast. So this is our illustrative plan of what we are proposing. The general concept plan obviously will contain more detail. We thought this plan was important to show relative to the common space and open space, because as one of our requests will be the zero lot line, and the reason we are going after RMF conditional district because it's the only district that allows zero lot line housing, and then but this will be a single family detached. So under the RMF CD, or this plan actually shows 3.9 units per acres, or about 65% of the allowable density, which would be about 246 acres at 6 per acre. So it's obviously a pared down version of the zoning relative to what could be permitted under RMF. Again, the zero lot line is important because of the product that's going to be built. We call these Pinehurst South cottages. So these will be cottages that are representative of POA, HOA maintenance entirely for yards, common space, amenity areas, and any common space will be subject to the maintenance of the HOA. So that product is relevant because it fits probably a need of maybe several different population sectors. That could be anything from the active adult to the empty nester to the retirees to the young professional, people that don't necessarily want or desire to be tied down by the maintenance of a yard. Again, it's very walkable. We haven't, other than the curb and gutter issue, we're really not proposing any deviation from the engineering design manual. So sidewalks, curb and gutter, sidewalks on both sides of the road, street trees and landscaping as required. Speaking of the landscaping, so well, in one of our conditions with the buffer, so we're basically proposing a buffer of some type around the whole project. One that's required where it abuts the residential zoning, but also additional buffering around basically the whole perimeter of the site minus the entrance on Blake Boulevard. So we felt that's important both for the character of the neighborhood internally and the character of the neighborhoods externally. And as I said earlier, this is a relatively new product offering maybe in the village. You may have something fairly similar, but this being a detached product at that density we think it's a little bit different offering that'll have some appeal. We have a couple slides here that kind of talk about the cottage character. You have some of the renderings that were provided as part of the application. There have been some additional renderings done and some photographs. You'll see the 4 in this slide, the 2 in the lower portion are probably some that you've already got. The 2 up top are new. And then the next slide will show a couple additional as well as a streetscape. So this streetscape comes straight off the general concept plan with some color added for some context. You'll see sidewalks both sides of the road, parking available at each unit, and then the street trees, trying to provide some neighborhood feel to this product. Again, this is a product that I can't recollect that it exists currently in Pinehurst, and it is another opportunity for some variation in the housing availability. So we did a couple things here. Obviously, the 2010 comp plan is the comp plan that you currently live by and your guiding principle. And we also understand that the draft comp plan 2019 version, I guess September's latest edition, is also something that you and the council are considering. So we're gonna address both of them. And I'll say this, the existing comp plan is about 80 pages long. The new comp plan is about 260 pages long. So there's a little bit more flavor in the new comp plan as opposed to the existing plan. But one of the things that we touched on here in terms of consistency and trying to be consistent with the comp plan is, as you see in the second paragraph from the top, providing a housing opportunity that meets the current and future residents' needs, housing options for the aging population, as well as opportunities for younger persons and families. So we talked through that a second ago, or I did a second ago, about this product really fits a larger population sector than what traditionally it might have fit. So it's primarily master down living. The plans range from about 1,500 square feet to 1,900 square feet with the ability to creep up into the low 2,000s, depending on the floor plan that's chosen and how you utilize bonus space. But again, primarily master floor living, master downs. And again, the young professional, I can speak to my daughter and folks, they don't seem to like to be tied down to, yard maintenance and cutting bushes and the grasses and things any more than I do. So anyway, relative to that, it's our opinion that we're providing this housing opportunity that, albeit in a zoning district that is maybe not consistent with the comp plan, which is why we're here tonight, we're asking for the board's consideration of a rezone. We think that it fits the intent of some piece of the current long-range plan as well as the future long-range, the draft plan, and we'll get into that in the next couple of slides. So the draft comp plan speaks to providing housing options for your largest population sector, which is your 65 to 74 age group, or 22%, or even more detailed, about 6,300 residents according to 2017 data. Also to provide choice in the infill areas close to mixed-use areas, and you'll see there we have Pinehurst, and we think that we're going to try to make a case tonight that that's Pinehurst South. And then walkable neighborhoods have been, I did a lot of reading on the new comp plan, but transitional housing, neighborhood destination spaces, parks, gardens, and amenities, and then that low maintenance housing option. So we think we touched the buttons on most all of those. Now, And then we want to talk about, Pinehurst South, and I've got a few things that are highlighted here that talks about better to meet the emerging trends. Future development should include new high-quality multifamily residents in addition to single-family homes in compact, walkable developments. So we kind of hit both of those. So we have that high density, but we're also hitting that single-family detached product in that compact, walkable development. And then there's a couple of other things to consider as it relates to the housing needs is, provide an option that does not currently exist. So people in Pinehurst, as they're potentially moving out of a larger residence, they don't have to go to a different town or jurisdiction here in the county to find it. Also, from the draft comp plan, we paid some attention to focus area number 2, which is the Pinehurst South area. Talks about, in the plan, it talks about there are numerous developed parcels, redevelopment potential, existing uses, with a variety provided, minimization of traffic. So as we, and Josh will talk more about this in a little while, but as we talk about single-family detached versus just an illustrative excerpt from the draft plan, which you'll see in the background there, in that mixed use and commercial environments, the single-family detached is obviously least impactful, and we'll have some data that backs that up. And then the inset map there talks about, you'll see our site there with the star on it, talks about developed parcels kind of in the darker color, what does it say, committed parcels? I'm not sure what that is. So, and then the redevelopment potential in the blue. So the areas north of Blake, Philip, if you could point to north of Blake Boulevard on there. So that's the Pinehurst South area. While I would agree that there is some potential for redevelopment, there are also some very viable structures and businesses there that are relatively new that maybe they get redeveloped at some point, but probably not. I don't see that anytime soon. And then we also looked at some of the top 10 strategies and strategic opportunities in that plan, where it talks about minimizing traffic, and it specifically addresses 5. So as that relates to Highway 5 in this large redevelopment area that's a mix of residential and commercial, we think that our plan, as it relates to just adding this residential component, providing some a catalyst, if you will, for Pinehurst South to redevelop in ways and grow and occupy maybe some buildings that are not currently occupied. We feel like we meet the intent of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But so in terms of mixed use, we kind of feel like we're there. And I've got one more slide to discuss that. And then button number 6 on the top 10 was this kind of addressing the Highway 5 commercial area and establishing some variety in there. The next slide is kind of a zoomed out aerial version of this. So we took some time and went through Pinehurst South and the surrounding areas and basically inventoried every building there. There's a few of them on the list that we couldn't fit in there because we just ran out of space. But if you'll see to the right side of your screen, or to the south of the project, that's the project. That's kind of Pinehurst Cottages South. Blake Boulevard and Highway 5, if most of you can recognize, you can see the post office in the upper right corner. So there's a variety of uses that are already there. For instance, you have a vacant bank building business for sale. That is obviously a potential redevelopment parcel. You have pharmacies, you have funerals, you have tax, you have financial, dentist, insurance, ABC store, church, all types of varying uses that currently exist. Now, if you were thinking about our concept plan, and the furthest point southeast on our concept plan to that pharmacy is a half a mile. It's about a half a mile depending on how you walk it. So in the sense of creating a development that has the potential to be walkable to commercial areas and potentially mixed use areas, we think that the one thing that Pinehurst South is missing potentially is the residential component. Now, obviously, along Monticello and further south, there are some homes, and there are homes on the west side of 5 that would further add to this area as it has the potential to redevelop. But this is a little bit our idea of the mixed use and how to capitalize on what you currently have, because quite honestly, the redevelopment of Pioneer South is a pretty tall order, and that's not something that's going to happen most likely in one project. It's probably a parcel like the BB&T building that gets redeveloped. I mean, I can imagine a corner market with a deli or something there that services the business and also services some of the homes in our project area, as well as areas in and around 5. And at the same time, we feel like we are lessening the traffic load on 5 as the alternative, with 160 residential units that produce about 1,600 trips a day, as opposed to the commercial that could produce up to 9,000 trips a day, depending on how it develops. And 9,000 trips a day that's a little bit of a staggering number, and it may be something less than that, but we feel pretty confident that it's going to be more than 1,600. So this is sort of our vision, if you will, to what possibly a mixed-use area that incorporates our project is. So again, it's about a 160-unit project. We're asking for up to 160 units. The plan is to build it in 3 phases. So we've got a couple slides here that kind of walk you through the 3 phases and how it gets built. So the first phase is about 41 lots that you see on the screen now. Obviously, we'd have to build a stormwater management area to the southeast as part of any of the development. And then the second phases would sort of pop in, as you see there. The second phase amenity would be included. Now that amenity center would include swimming pool, community center, potentially bocce ball, shuffleboard, pickleball, community park, playgrounds, and then our plan is to try and amenitize around the pond, walking trails and paths and things like that. And then the third phase drops in, as you see there. So the idea being that while a product like this, on a 40 by 70 pad, if you will, 10 feet of separation, it's a little bit difficult to build that type of product. It's almost like building apartments, but it's difficult to build that type of product without some idea of clearing trees and grading land, right? But the intent would be to the extent practical, would be to bring in phase 1 and preserve as much as the existing vegetation as possible, then bring in phase 2. But as each phase develops, the houses will be landscaped. We'll have the street trees, and we'll have landscaping around the trees and things like that. So, the site is fairly suitable for that type of arrangement. There's not a lot of topographic relief there, so you don't have these, major hillsides and major valleys that you have to fill. So, we would like to do it with as low impact as possible. So, just some site data. Again, we've talked about some of this, rezoning to RMS-CD, site acreage, 41 acres. We talked about the building size, the building pads, front setbacks. So the building setbacks, of course, are based on the parent tract in this zoning district. So you have a 30-foot front, so that would be the Blake Boulevard side, a 20-foot by condition actually side, which would be the eastern side and the western side. And then the side street really doesn't apply, does it? Yeah, it's kind of applies in the side street, but it's probably on the Highway 5 side. And the rear bend 25 foot, which is on the south side. Again, the buffering requirements, we have a 20-foot Class 2 buffer adjacent to residential properties with the added condition of a 10-foot Class 1 buffer along the common property line, zone NC and OP. Access to the site, right in, right out access, and one full movement on the Blake Boulevard. And a gated emergency access onto Olivia Lane such that it is provided that it is required or allowed. And allowed would be subject to some additional title search relative to Olivia Lane's ownership. Internal circulations would be public right-of-ways constructed to the village standards, and additionally internal sidewalks and pedestrian access to amenities. Stormwater management will be curb and gutter, storm drainage pipes and inlets, and then a common stormwater pond. We also have a couple bioretention areas in some of the green space where they could be kind of used as usable space. And then, of course, we have our pre- and post-development runoff rates design, 10-year storm design. As Alex alluded to earlier, utilities, Moore County Public Utilities, water and sewer, this project will have a pump station on it, just because of the way the site falls, but it'll be in the second phase. First phase can gravity out. Second and third phase will need the pump station. And then parking. So parking, we're required to have 350 spaces, and that's based on 2 spaces per unit, and then 1 space per 200 square feet of clubhouse, 1 space for 75 square feet of pool, and other outdoor rec facilities. So what we provided is 357, 306 of those garage, 49 and 2 handicap at the amenity center. Impervious surface. Now this is, to me, is important because, excuse me, and the impervious surface, the max allowed in this district, 60%. And what we're proposing is about 45%. And the way we do that, because we're in the RMF, if you looked at the 60% allowable versus one of the earlier plans I showed you that had the neighborhood commercial where we have potentially lots of parking, potentially lots of rooftops, we think this is a less impactful area or impervious impact because we have a little bit more green space, we have a little bit more room between units, and we have a little bit more common space. So anyway, we're proposing in the neighborhood of 45%. Alex, in his staff report, talked about the development conditions. Did you list those out specifically? Okay. So these are, I won't repeat them, but you can see them here. And if you have any questions about them, I'm sure we'll get to those. But, the biggest thing I would say about the conditions are maybe one of the few things that we're really asking from the village for is the concession on the valley gutter and the curb versus the curb and gutter. The rest of them are a little bit self-imposed conditions, such as the buffers and of course, the SNEA would be required. And then, of course, we have 10 feet of building separation. And in reference to the building separation, we have taken the general concept plan through staff, which included the fire marshal. And at this time, we validated his concerns with adequate fire flow, and should that change, we're willing to address it in an alternative manner. This is just another look at the general concept plan. I see everybody's got that in front of them. It has mostly, I won't regurgitate anything off of this plan, but if we have any questions, we can certainly come back to it. So traffic, of course, we all know that traffic is a hot button everywhere we go. So Philip, I'm going to let Philip and Josh sort of take the stage here and kind of start talking through the traffic, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'll let Josh talk about it more in detail, but basically we asked for 2 different trip generation analysis from Ramey Kemp. One based on the current zoning and one based off the proposed development. So under the current zoning, that's the green map you guys saw earlier, 180,000 square foot of commercial, 50 single family lots. You generate about 9,700 trips per day. Now that's with the most intense allowable use within the commercial district, but nevertheless, you have the ability to generate about 9,700 trips per day. With this proposed development of 160 single family units, you generate 1,600 trips per day. So the current zoning potential generates over 6 times as much as what this proposed development does. And I think that's an important aspect to keep in mind because, as we all know, traffic on Highway 5 is a concern today, and it'll continue to be a concern in the future. So with that, I'll let Josh talk a little more about the traffic impact analysis that is currently underway.
All right. Josh Ranke here with Ramey Kemp and Associates. We're performing the traffic impact analysis. I just wanted to go through some bullets and kind of explain the process and where we're at with that. So we were brought on board actually very proactively and great. Unfortunately, it was during the summer, so the way NCDOT likes to conduct things, they want counts done during the school year when traffic's at its peak. So we were kind of in a holding pattern until we could collect the data. We are working with village staff as well as the NCDOT district and congestion management groups. What you see before you there, the study area, is what we scoped out with all the review agencies. So we have a couple intersections along NC5, Blake Boulevard, Monticello, Blake Boulevard and the site driveways. So essentially, we're looking at, for the development size, potentially intersections that'll be impacted by the traffic from this development. Once again, I know we looked at what was or what is currently zoned and what could sort of be a maximum traffic generator there, and then what we're looking at here. What we're looking at here is actually kind of conservative, but it's what we agreed with the NCDOT. Oh, there you go, perfect. So we looked at this as single-family detached housing, and then just kind of provided a comparison if it were senior adult housing. Once again, since this is not age restricted, we are going with the more conservative one, which is single-family detached housing, and that's the numbers you've seen with 1,600 daily trips. You've got in the morning 118 total, so that's entering and exiting vehicles, and in the PM you've got 160 total vehicles that's entering and exiting. You can see the senior adult housing is significantly less. It's slightly less than half of that, which, once again, we're not using those numbers in the analysis because we're looking at a conservative approach, but it is likely that this development could actually operate more like that, where it would have fewer trips. So kind of where we're at, we've collected the data. We've kind of come up with the growth rate for the future year we're going to analyze. We add in our site traffic. We've provided all the assumptions to the review agencies and are waiting for their feedback so we can finalize the analysis and determine where we'd need mitigation, if any locations at the study area intersections, to accommodate the additional traffic due to the development. We've kind of preliminarily looked at some of the intersections just to see what's going on with existing conditions along NC5. Those are kind of your bigger concerns. We've seen, decent levels of service, but at the unsignalized intersections, some delays at the minor street approaches, which is not uncommon. So it is something where we might be looking at signalization. Once again, that would be dependent on NCDOT approval with any signalization recommendations. So from here, we'll wrap up the analysis. We'll finalize the TIA and provide that to the DOT and the village staff for review. And then once again, improvements that are determined necessary would be tied into a driveway permit by the NCDOT. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Josh. So I promise you I'm not going to read this slide, but so it's just kind of, it goes a little bit back to what I was speaking of before, and we've read the staff report, and we understand the staff report, and we all due respect to the staff. The reason we're here, I mean, if you look at consistency or consistent or not consistent, obviously if the zoning is changing, it's somewhat not consistent with any long-range plan or comp plan, so we completely understand that. But I think the argument, or I won't say argument, that sounds negative, doesn't it? But the point that we'd like to make is that we feel like, as it relates to the comp plan, the existing comp plan and the draft plan, we feel like this is a business node that has some zoning attached to it on our current parcel, but we feel like that by bringing this product to the market, we feel like we can do a couple things. We can provide a housing need that needs to be met, which these houses are going to probably run in the low to mid threes. Yeah, so low to mid threes. And at the same time, it's a product type that we think could come to the market. And then, in addition to that, provide somewhat of a catalyst to help Pinehurst South redevelop as needed, and then maybe even bolster some of the existing businesses that are there, and then surrounding areas of Highway 5. So, again, I won't read that, but I think you understand, I hope you understand our intent and our goal, and we certainly understand both. I understand a lot better both comp plans now. I've read them a couple of times, but it's been an interesting process, because the more I have gotten into it, and you sort of zoom back at about 5,000 feet and you look and you see, well, we kind of have this mixed-use opportunity here, albeit, we're not right in the village core, but we're in this pretty important business node on the south end of Pinehurst that potentially could use an added flavor, if you will, in terms of the housing product. So again, we're not coming in at completely multifamily density, but obviously we're relatively high density. So we would just like to ask the planning board's consideration our request, and obviously we're here to answer any questions, and I'll ask Marcel if he has anything to add.
I think we covered just about everything for hopefully the board to be able to ask questions.
Okay. That more or less concludes our presentation. We have some slides that we can refer back to as you have any questions, and we certainly thank you for your time as always.
Well, thank you for the presentation. There are 3 people that signed up on the sheet to speak for the speak about the application, and I would like to give those folks an opportunity to say their piece before we as a board direct any questions to the applicant. The first name on the sheet was Robert Coates. Mr. Coates, would you please come up to the microphone? If they'll let you.
Sure.
While he's getting situated, I saw 1 or 2 people came in later. Would those people that came in late want an opportunity to speak about the application? Okay, thank you.
I'm Robert Coates, 21 Edinburgh Lane, Pinehurst. I sort of thought that we might hear a little from staff first, as far as what their recommendation was on this. I don't know if that's going to be coming later.
It will come later.
Okay.
Yep.
But at any rate, I don't want to steal their thunder, but the bottom line is that the staff, I believed, recommended sort of a denial of this application on a couple of grounds. So I was going to say I'd echoed that sentiment, but since they haven't made it yet, perhaps that's premature. But keep that in mind.
Well, it's on the website, so it's out there.
Right, but perhaps not everyone in the room knows that.
Okay.
There's been a lot of wringing of hands by people in Pinehurst as far as what's been going on in our town, our neighbor to the south in Aberdeen. There have been a number of developments down there, 150 homes going in at the intersection of Linden Road South and Highway 5, 300 units in Blake Village, and the latest 500-unit proposal across from the pit. Okay, I think Pinehurst now has an opportunity to do something to stem the tide of this unbridled development, as opposed to just saying, gee, I wish Aberdeen would slow things down. I think traffic is certainly my main consideration. The traffic study that was done for the Blake Village development, they rated the intersection at Olivia and Highway 5 as a level of service F. That's the lowest you can get. That's before we're getting into adding another 1,600 trips a day. I think what I heard from this presentation today was, well, you know, this might not be great, might not be the perfect thing what you want, but it's better than what you could get. I think that's a bad way to look at development. If we add this amount of traffic onto 2 exits there onto Blake, it's just going to overwhelm Monticello, Blake itself, Highway 5. It's going to make an already bad situation even worse. I won't get into the fact that this high-density housing in this area is inconsistent with both the 2010 and what we think the 2019 comprehensive land use plan is going to be. That's a whole nother situation. But I believe the real important thing is that we maintain our existing zoning. It was well thought out in the past. It's there for a reason. We should stick with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Marguerite Ingram, would you like to speak about the application, ma'am?
think it's a good idea. It could benefit me and my brother down there on Olivia Lane. Traffic is hectic, but I think it would benefit us. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bramwell?
I'm Bob Bramwell, live at 6 Lagan Court in Pinehurst. Appreciate this opportunity to give you a couple of comments on this application. I feel that the analysis that the staff has done properly touches on the fact that this has been a commercial area, and it is anticipated to be an even more important commercial area in the upcoming 10 years. And I think that Pinehurst rightly needs to concentrate on supporting businesses. I believe that Mr. Gano does fine housing design. I'm just of the opinion that this is the wrong place to try and put it. It's not exactly smack dab in the middle of the 290-acre focus area number 2, but it takes up enough of the space so that I begin to worry about the cohesive workforce of the future, multicultural, 2-level buildings and so forth that the consultants have imagined could come in the future. In terms of the traffic, yeah, it's a mess, and NCDOT can't move fast enough to expand the width. I've heard from more than one source that it is planned. It's not funded, but it's planned. We know that they have funding for the area from the Fair Barn down to the Pinehurst border in putting in a suicide lane. Not great, but it'll help. Then there's plenty of talk about 4-laning all the way down to US 1 in Aberdeen. This will just draw more development pressure, and it's up to Pinehurst to defend Pinehurst aspects, and Aberdeen is free to, be developers every day if they feel like that's in their best interest. So in summary, I'm in favor of this board issuing a denial recommendation and push it up to the board and see what questions they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience have a few words to say about the application? I don't see any, so we'll ask the applicant and staff to come back on the table, and board members will ask questions, and we'll start, let's say, on my extreme right with Paul Roberts.
Thanks for the specific description. I think it was very, very clear and allowed us to understand what your concept is. Just two questions, or excuse me, really one question, is the sidewalks, the walkability that you've talked about, where are the residents walking to? Are they crossing Highway 5 and, there's no sidewalks, there's no connection, I guess, to any of the businesses?
Yeah, no, you're correct. So Blake Boulevard is basically a ribbon pavement street. There's no sidewalks, a ditch neighborhood. However, as we run into with most developments, sidewalks either required on one side or both sides, and sometimes they are, if you will, the sidewalk to nowhere. You know, the defense, I guess, that is, well, if we have a project, you know, a town project or a different developer project, at some point that we do some street improvements, then we can add sidewalks, and then that provides that connectivity. Ultimately, on this neighborhood, I mean, you know, you would like to see them be able to connect into Pinehurst South for obvious reasons, you know, potentially get to work, get to places where they can frequent. But no, your question is correct. They do not terminate to an existing sidewalk.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if it was crossing the street to get to the kind of strip mall business district.
No.
Okay. And did I hear you right? Did you say that by building the 160 homes there, it would decrease traffic?
No, I said it, what I basically said, it would.
It was all built out.
It would be a lesser alternative than the current underlying zoning at neighborhood
Okay.
commercial.
Fully developed?
Right.
Okay, but that's all the questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Schreiber.
Thank you. What's the price points that you're looking for in these homes?
We expect to hit the mid 300s, so in that 350 price range is where our sweet spot is expected to be.
Nice presentation. Thank you.
I think you've done a good job. I think this is a nice neighborhood, and I have concerns about the two entrances being so close to each other and such a dead end at the back of it. But I also have concerns about the zoning. We only have a few areas in the village that are zoned neighborhood commercial, and they're basically on the four corners, Midland Road, Rattlesnake, Linden, and Highway 5. And I believe this zoning was intentional as part of the 2010 comprehensive plan, and then, you know, especially on Highway 5, they have it slated as an innovation hub in that area. And yes, it does include housing, but I would hope that it would come after the commercial and the innovation. So if there were businesses there, they could serve Monticello, Lake Pinehurst, Jackson Hamlet, you know, those areas without us having to travel up and down Highway 5, which I think would decrease traffic on either end. And we also have all the developments that are coming up on Highway 5 in Aberdeen, and it's like we're competing with, you know, what the gentleman said, 700, 950 homes that are already planned to go in there. And I think it would serve Pinehurst better if we provided businesses and opportunities for jobs to these people, as opposed to competing for their sales of homes. So I like this zero lot line idea and your drawings. I just don't think this is the best place for it. So do you have any counter?
I guess the only thing or one of the things I would, I guess, counter to is the product offering is probably distinctly different than what has previously been offered on the, you know, any of the Aberdeen tracks, minus maybe the townhome component. I do, you know, from presentation on the Aberdeen track, I know that they have some of this above grade potential for living over retail, I think. But and I completely understand your comment and your concerns. But I guess my best rebuttal at this point would be, you know, we hear, I come to a lot of Pinehurst meetings, planning board and council, and I go to a lot of Southern Pines meetings, and I go to a lot of Aberdeen meetings. Traffic is probably one of the biggest hot buttons that we see, and I look at 41 acres of potential developable land. Mind you, 13 of it's already zoned in a high-density residential. So, you know, I have an R5 zoning that's almost equivalent to what we're doing. So it's a little bit difficult for a consultant to combat the concerns that we always hear in the communities that we work and live. And with all due respect, I guess I don't want to say that we just rolled over and doing the lesser of the two evil, because that's not very progressive nor innovative, and that's not the intent. But we did identify a need. We have Marcel had gotten some market data from not developers, but realtors and things. It's somewhat referenced in your draft plan about providing a need that's not currently met. But at the end of the day, we do provide a lesser impact relative to traffic, and we also we feel like we're providing an opportunity for Pinehurst South, as it currently exists, to hopefully take off. And there are some parcels there that could redevelop, and as I mentioned earlier, there are some parcels there that are perfectly fine structures, and they're occupied and they're viable and moving on. But as I sort of zoom back 30,000 feet, looking at this, I was like, well, I feel like we're maybe providing a component to that mixed use-ish type neighborhood or area that maybe meets the intent of the comp plan in a way. So I'm not disagreeing necessarily with your point. I just wanted to provide some counter, if I may.
I appreciate that. What about the entrances to the subdivision and being so close together?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The entrances to the subdivision are probably a little bit more than 300 feet apart. It's with the number of units, we have to provide some, as it relates to fire, we have to provide some secondary access, and we feel like we've provided a third on Olivia relative to emergency. So, Josh, can you help me with that a little bit? He is our traffic guy. But.
So kind of to discuss that is something that we'll be looking at, DOT will be reviewing. So when we model that, we see if there are any queuing issues, any sorts of issues with the close proximity of driveways, where left turns getting into one site maybe prevent, people turning out from another, cause any sort of conflict. So it's something that, once again, just due to the nature of when we could collect data, we don't have that, but it is something we'll be looking at. It's something that DOT is very cognizant of quite often. We have these challenges. I'm not sure with this site we'll have such a challenge, but a lot of times we'll have on busier roads a left turn lane that could be blocking other driveways. The traffic volumes don't seem as significant on Blake that it's a big concern of mine, but it's something that will be addressed and looked at.
And if you need to move one of them, is that an option that you can provide, or?
I think that's going to deal with the frontage of the site. That's going to make that challenging, correct? Or
yeah, I guess in terms of moving or removing, I guess the removing option would be a potential option if we were able to provide a turn lane or were required to provide a turn lane. But I guess the one concern you end up having there goes back to emergency services and having another way out if one of the internal streets were blocked. Now, the internal circulation of the site is pretty good in terms of it gridded up. So most likely, if for some reason one of the streets were blocked, a fire or emergency personnel could get to some other part of the site. So we're always concerned at that level of emergency service access when you have one entrance into the site, especially not knowing at this point what the outcome or what the ownership or outcome of Olivia Lane may be.
If it becomes available, would you likely put another exit on Olivia Lane?
If it were accessible, by way of either a public street or a private street to which we could get access, then I would think it would benefit everybody to have an access there.
Thank you.
Ms. Wellstein.
I'd like to ask Ms. Ingram how this would be beneficial to her. How would this be beneficial to you?
Had a grant for every house in Jackson Hamlet to get on the sewer, and me and my brother didn't get it. Maybe they could help us do this, that we could get on it.
Thank you.
If I may elaborate on that just a little bit, if you don't mind. We had that conversation Randy Gould, Moore County Public Utilities, and his staff about potentially the two houses in the out parcels to the east-southeast there. I think one of those is Miss Ingram's, but what she was referencing, they weren't able to have sewer, so we will have a pump station on the site, and we will have gravity sewer in that area, and the elevations, we kind of looked at it, the elevations work, so we could potentially pick them up if that were agreeable.
I have the same question as Paul about where you're going to walk to. I mean, you're not going to walk across 5 for sure. And Cindy addressed the hub, and I think that is important for Pinehurst to keep that hub area. So I'm concerned that we're jumping the gun with this project. I mean, it's a nice project. I appreciate your presentation, but I think it's a little premature for what we're working with.
And if I may address the sidewalk issue just one more time, I'm pretty sure the sidewalks are required at least on one side of the road by village standards. So as they are in any neighborhood, and rightfully so, you're trying to create walkable environments that ultimately lead to some connectivity either by another project or a village project. So that's part of the reason, and of course we think it's important once you get inside the neighborhood to be able to walk to your neighbor's house and do it safely. So, but anyway, but you're correct, they're not connected anywhere at this point, but they are a village requirement. Thank you.
Ms. Lathan.
I also had concerns about the ingress and egress there on Blake, them being so close to each other, and picturing everyone trying to get out in the morning. It'd be lovely if all the people on one side decided to turn right and everyone on the other decided to turn left, but that's not going to happen. And they're going to be coming right across each other, and I imagine a traffic snare there that could tie up Blake for everyone from surrounding areas. So I appreciate your comments to Cindy, but that was also a concern that I had. With Olivia Lane and the emergency access there, if I'm understanding you correctly, there is not currently access along that lane because, I'm sorry, I didn't follow, whether it's determined to be private or public, what's the issue?
So currently the village uses Olivia Lane for emergency access and garbage, I think. Is that right there? And there is some version or form of agreement, I think, as it relates to that. But so the question of Olivia Lane is ownership of Olivia Lane. Does the village have the right to grant access from another neighborhood? So I think some of the title issues are being worked on or worked out relative to Olivia Lane. So we didn't take too much liberty. And I mean, obviously, we would have loved to have had a through street into Olivia Lane, assuming Olivia Lane was a dedicated public street or something like that. But so we didn't do that, but we did take some liberties relative to the way it's currently used and showed that as just a gated emergency access. So the title issues of ownership are what's in question.
I see. At the neighborhood meeting, I didn't see any discussion with the residents at Olivia Lane that if Olivia Lane became an egress and access point for this neighborhood, how the folks on Olivia Lane would feel about the added traffic burden on what is a very small street.
Right. I don't, and honestly, Ms. Layton, I'm not sure that came up, but obviously we showed we had this basically this plan and that we showed at the neighborhood meeting. So we went through complete project explanation of the general concept plan and access points. I don't know that access was a topic of discussion. I just don't recall. The question was not asked.
Right. I didn't see it reflected, so I just wasn't sure. But
it was a meeting with plan. I mean, the plan was there, so
right.
it was there.
Right. And then with the trip generation summaries, the table 1, if you could talk to me a little bit about, with the reflection of if a shopping center is there, these are the number of anticipated trips, morning, evening. I was a little surprised. How do you know what that shopping center, I mean, I understand this is all hypothetical, but we know when we have a community with houses, people leave in the morning to go to work and to school, and they come home in the, leave in the morning, come home in the afternoon. With the shopping center, it seems a bit hypothetical to say this is what morning traffic looks like when we don't know what's there. Why is everyone going to the shopping center at 8 a.m.? Or?
Yeah, and so with both of any land use we use,
Right.
there's a trip generation manual. Institute of Transportation Engineers has a trip generation
Right.
manual. What we did there was look at, okay, what is the sort of, once again, that's why I'm saying we're doing the traffic impact analysis on the proposed zoning, what's going to be built. This other is a fictitious to show how bad
Sure.
it could be. And it's a combination of, like, it had restaurant uses, things like that. So we looked at what could be the worst case scenario there. So once again, it's a combination of restaurant, retail, things like that, where you'd have some morning. Obviously, your PM is the higher generator there.
Right.
You're not going to have as many trips in the morning at most retail, even restaurant uses, sort of a McDonald's or a Starbucks or something. They are jamming in the morning, but
Right.
most of your restaurants and things like that also kind of have that heavier volume in the PM. So that is a worst case, looking at a combination of different types of what could be used in there. And that's, I know they made it clear that 9,700 it looks really bad, and that's kind of the worst it could be. In terms of the proposed zoning, residential is a relatively low, it just has those distinct peaks. In the morning and the PM, you're absolutely right, and it dies way off in the middle of the day, where commercial still has, and that's why a lot of the daily traffic shows significantly higher in commercial. It has that staying power where people are still going at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., where it's kind of low trip generator for residential. So that is a combination of land uses that were allowed to kind of come up with a worst case scenario. So it's not all shopping center and saying, wow, there's, darn near 300 people coming or going from a shopping center, but between a restaurant use and various things that we looked at that could be in there with that amount of land, with those land uses.
All right, well, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Josh's statement. So Josh's trip gem was based on a square footage of occupied space that we gave him, and that was done based on a conceptual plan or a land use, preliminary land use plan. So we certainly feel like that number is, as Josh said, is high. So it's gonna vary, but I don't think it's gonna get below 1,600 trips in a retail or a commercial application on that acreage. So that was just the basic. So
Thank you.
thank you.
It's high but realistic. It's not like we're like, we could jam so much stuff in skyscrapers. It's a realistic land use plan. It's just the higher trip generators.
Understood. Go ahead.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, sir. LKC compliments for professional presentation, always well done, well prepared. We appreciate it because it makes our jobs easier. A couple quick questions. So we've spent a lot of time talking about traffic. This is the first time I've ever heard a developer propose this project to mitigate traffic, because if we really wanted to, if that was our number one objective, we would zone it as a park, and then we'd have really good traffic. So using that as the number one lead in, to me, yeah, that's not where we're going. But I think I saw on one of your slides the if we developed it as it is zoned slide. Does that respect everything in the current long-range plan and all requirements?
No, that probably.
Okay, so that plan doesn't exist? My question was going to be, if you did that, how many housing units would be on the site compared to 160?
If we did that commercial
If you just respected what was there and just build it as it's zoned,
Oh, yeah, can you go back?
less than 50?
Yeah, so
30.
like 48.
30,
in the-
48.
48 to 50 in the
So you could
R5.
put 48 housing units, because I'm having a bit of deja vu. I'm remembering the same faces and we're talking, but there's a different project.
Right.
And in that project, we had a residential zoned site, and we wanted to rezone it for commercial
Right.
because there's not enough space for commercial, and there's a driving need for that. So I was wondering if we could site adapt that lovely project that was the commercial into this part where you could put commercial, together with that, and if that might not be a good idea. I don't know. I'm not the developer, but I was looking at the numbers, and I respect Joel's experience, but I'm looking at $115 a square foot sale price, so $350 doesn't compute. Sorry, I'm an engineer. I'm thinking $250, but on the staffing report,
I didn't say 350, he did.
I know, but you didn't.
Go ahead.
He doth not protest. Alex, on the staffing report, do we ever include current inventory of housing at price points? Like, for example, if I asked you, because one of the things, if there was a driving need, and we said, hey, look, we just don't have enough housing available for folks who want to get in here. As a matter of fact, there are no houses for sale in Pinehurst at $250,000 or below. That might be something. I'm asking you because maybe the data could be provided in the staffing reports to help understand. Because my feeling from talking to realtors is that there's houses sitting on the market now that are for sale in Pinehurst that aren't selling. And I appreciate that people want new houses, and this is satisfying that kind of a need.
So we're planning staff, so we speak more to just land use. We're not in the real estate market. We may have an idea, we may have friends, but that was something that would behoove an applicant or someone offering any rebuttal if they had that market analysis.
Okay.
We don't have those capabilities.
Okay, thanks. What's the lot size on your proposal?
Well, obviously there's 0 lot lines, so there's really not a lot size, but call it our 5,000 square footage type lot.
5,000 square foot.
And that may be.
Well, yeah, I'm just running things in my head going, okay, if I'm going to spend $350,000 on a 5,000 square foot lot where I can pass the sugar to my neighbors. Okay. All right.
And one of the things that we also gleaned from the draft comp plan as it related to, the quality of the product, and I'm not just saying this based on price, but as I look at the perceived price point and the square footage, we're probably back in that 125 to 160 per square foot range, which, sort of, it is spoken to in the comp plan or the draft.
That's nice finishes there, real nice finishes.
Well, I guess my point is what they were talking about. The comp plan discussed a little bit the quality of housing and the
Sure.
So.
And understand and appreciate new housing selling better than the old housing. Understand that part. But I'm just wondering, given that you can move quickly to fruition, why not just propose the 50 houses and the commercial development that you wanted to do off of, I think it was off of Midland here, and then life's easy.
The Midland site was a 2 acres, or a little less than 2 acres. So when you talk about 13,000 square feet sitting on a 28-acre tract, I don't know what the absorption, if you quadruple that is. So.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Let's see. And that's it.
Thank you. I have a problem with the concept of the rezoning aspect of the application. You're asking for residential mixed use, multifamily, but there's not a spec of multifamily in the proposal. The multifamily request is primarily to gain density and the 0 lot line aspect of the application. I would say that's certainly innovative, but I'm a bit confused when you say the lot is 5,000 square feet. You're showing building pads here for different sizes of buildings, and just for the sake of the plan, you have 2 lot layouts, one totaling 2,184 square feet, the other totaling 2,535 square feet, with an 11-foot dimension between them. Are these townhouses or condominiums?
Well,
is the footprint going to be owned by the homeowner or the homeowners association?
Okay, so let me address your first comment first, if I may. So I think Mr. Kelly asked about what size would those lots be equivalent to, is that correct? So that's where the 5,000 came from. So the zero lot line in that respect is that, yes, the homeowner owns basically the building footprint. The balance of the land is common space, i.e. POA, HOA type maintenance. But the homeowner will own the footprint of the home fee simple. And they are cottages, not townhomes, but, and to address your question about the RMF zoning request, when you go through the village's zoning criteria, it's really the only thing that we have found that fit was the RMF, which is why we're here with RMF CD with the condition.
I understand, but I still think there's a disconnect there that doesn't fly with me. Why is there not any landscaping screen along the units on Olivia to the extreme southeast, the 4 units that back up to Olivia? The drawing I have, it doesn't look like there's a screen there.
Oh, well, yeah, so that backs up to a road. I mean, we could easily provide screening there. I didn't catch that, Mr. Chairman, but that backs up to a road, so it's not zoned as residential, but it would be easy enough to provide on the back of the units.
Well, you're saying you're screening the entire perimeter. This is part of the perimeter, and it's been eliminated,
yeah,
but you would do it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, for sure. We probably missed that because it was a road, but we would absolutely do that.
Can I see the first phase again? So the 41 units will have to use the, essentially, 1 lane in and 1 lane out off of Blake. And that's not a problem.
Well, I don't know if I know the answer completely to that question, but I would imagine that 41 units and a single point of access is generally not a problem, because in some places we can go up to 100.
Let's see the third phase. Without 2. Can you do that? No?
Probably not.
Okay. When it does get fully built out, has a traffic consultant looked at the need for either a left turn off of Blake into the boulevard? And what would be the sight distance at that intersection looking east or northeast?
And that is something that definitely we will be looking at, both of those things. Turn lanes, quite typically, especially at driveways, are things we need to consider. We need to meet NCDOT and the village's standards that they have in terms of level of service and such. So we're looking at safety, we're looking at capacity, and that's kind of where also sight distance would come in. So once again, I'll be doing the traffic impact analysis. I work closely with the village and the DOT all the way from scoping through the review, and it is something that, especially the further east driveway with the curvature in the road, that will be considered. It's something that DOT looks at a lot. They say, okay, is it, are there physical barriers? Is it elevation? They look at all sorts of things with the sight distance, and we'd have to comment on that in the traffic impact analysis as well. So it's definitely something that will be addressed. It's not something that I have answers to yet because we're early on in the process, but it will be addressed in the traffic impact analysis.
Yeah, any timetable as to when that will be completed?
We should get our assumptions in the memorandum of understanding back probably within the next week or so. That's kind of outside my hands because it's being reviewed by the NCDOT. Once we get those back, I would assume we should be able to wrap up the analysis and submit the traffic impact analysis within about 2 weeks. Then NCDOT has 40 business days to fully execute the review of my traffic impact analysis. So a lot of it is kind of a waiting game, but like I said, we should be probably within about 3 weeks submitting, and then 40 business days for their thorough review. They can do it in less, but typically they utilize their maximum allowable.
The sanitary sewer system requires a pump station that will require a licensed operator. Is that going to be part of the covenants and restrictions of the homeowners association, or would that be an independent organization that's responsible for maintenance and operation
Well, it'll be.
and
more-
compliance with the laws and all that?
So the intent and the way the general concept plans, it would be Moore County Public Utilities owning and operating all the utilities in the subdivision. So it would be a public utility.
I don't have any other questions, but appreciate your presentation. Very well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time.
Would staff have any questions or comments at this time?
Sure. What we'd like to comment on is a little bit on the comp plan. Kelly, can you bring up our presentation? Hey, Philip, can I grab that? Thanks. And with respect to, some of the comments that we've heard on the comp plan, I wholeheartedly agree with what Mr. Carpenter was talking about with respect for providing for different levels of housing.
Aaron, can you speak up a little bit?
Not coming in? Sorry. We don't, when we're looking, I don't disagree with what Mr. Carpenter was saying with respect to what type of housing, providing additional housing choice in the community. What we're looking at, though, however, with the comp plan, when we look at our comp plan, both our 2010 comp plan and the current comp plan being proposed, we're looking at an area where we have a more prescriptive recommendation than that overall goal that Mr. Carpenter was referring to. And if you look at the 2010 comp plan, I apologize for the quality of that clip because I clipped it out of a PDF. You start to see what the recommendation is in this particular area, and this is other business area. This part, yes, this is residential, but this is other business area. Now you flash forward a bit to for focus area number 2, as part of the new recommended comp plan, you take a look at what the recommendation is for this particular area, and we say mixed-use center, stacked residential, and you can see it's for this entire area. Now, if we look at that, and that's really where, when we're looking at developing the staff report and our recommendation, we're looking at these two documents, and primarily this document right now, but we also have this document that we're looking at. And when we came up with that recommendation against that, we didn't think it was consistent. It was based on those two recommendations. That focus area 2, we have another recommendation. Another recommendation as a priority strategization that we create a small area plan for the NC Highway 5 commercial area to facilitate redevelopment as an innovation hub with office, medical, life science, and research facilities supported with small-scale retail services and residential. So I think what Sonia was saying before is we might be a little bit premature at this point. I think, when we potentially do a small area plan for this area, is there an area that maybe we can carve out for some additional residential types of densities in that area? Yes, but I don't think we are particularly there yet. So based on those factors is why we made the recommendation that we did based on those parts of the comp plan. Again, Mr. Carpenter is spot on with those other recommendations, and this looks to be a great housing product. But at this particular time and this particular place is why we were recommending against at this particular time.
Thank you. Before we close the public hearing, I'll ask you, are there any other questions from anybody in the room about the application?
I'd like to add just few other details, if I could, and I'd like to speak part of it to Mr. Kelly, if I could. One of the reasons that we have sought out this property in this location is multiple phases of it, and it was primarily fulfill a need. And we were being reached out as a local builder and a smaller developer. This is probably one of the more intense projects I've ever engaged into. But we were constantly being approached by, I've got a lot of friends in the real estate world that expressed a huge need for this type of product, meaning I built many, many houses in Pine Wild and in our other communities, and that might have happened 25, 30 years ago. And today, we're an aging society in our immediate area. Those same realtors, which have been around for a long time, those people are now aging out of those larger homes, looking for a place to stay in the community they decided to retire in. And we're getting the feedback that there is no place other than, say, Belle Meade or Phoenix Village. And they're not quite interested or ready to go there, nor I don't know if the availability is necessarily there. The closest thing that I could associate to what available product is out there, we're involved in it, is there's 7 duplex lots available at Cotswold. That's probably the closest thing that we could associate, I could associate to a comparative product to what we're proposing here. And every time I've talked with a client, most people don't necessarily care for a common wall arrangement. They still want to be independent. They still prefer to have their own house, but they don't want the yard maintenance and they don't want everything that goes with a single-family house. So we were trying to respond to that, and then we looked at other locations not in Pinehurst, and that was not an option. They want to stay in Pinehurst. They want to live here. They want to be near their friends that they've created new friends with. They want to still be able to be close to the clubhouse because that's where they engage with their friends. The hospital we try to be considerate of where the hospital was in relation to what side of the circle we were going to be on. So this property and this location kind of fit a lot of the requirements that we were being asked of. And just to kind of sum it up, we just felt like it really, really fit a need for the community of what they were asking for.
Any thought in those discussions with the real estate agents about the current zoning of the major part of the parcel where you could have like ground floor businesses and a walking area, if you want to call it, for lack of a better term, of kind of a European city kind of thing, where you'd have maybe apartments kind of things on the second floor and develop in that area, shops. When we were talking about maybe site adapting the other project that you had, I think it was on Midland, over to here, maybe some of those same businesses could be there on the ground floor and the folks that you're talking about, because I have a difficult time understanding how the folks who are going to move out of their house or sell their house now and then move into the $350,000, 5,000 square foot lot house. But if you move into a smaller unit and you've got an apartment and some of your friends are living around there and you've got businesses in the area, you can walk to the market, you can walk to have lunch or meet, and then, yeah, you still have access and doing those kind of things. Any thought to that sort of a development?
We haven't processed that too much. What we were trying to do is identify what we knew was favorable of the type of clientele that we were wanting to cater to, which was, easy access in and out of a house, one-level living, master bedroom on the ground floor. Everybody, the majority of the clientele, and I think we've qualified, that doesn't necessarily mean 100% of the clientele is who's going to move into this product. There's a little bit of this product being built at Beacon Ridge in those areas, and there is a variety of age groups that have purchased those homes. But I feel like this particular community, we are aging in this community because of the sheer retirement draw that we've had for many, many years because of our golf courses and just the sheer nature of our Pinehurst is. So those are the people we were trying to address. Maybe to respond to, I guess your live-work concept, where we've got a mixed-use type of environment where we have commercial on the ground level, residential on the upper level. Don't get me wrong, I'm a pretty ambitious thinker too. I think you would find those type of live-work, those type of developments closer to an infill of a downtown area because of that pedestrian component. What, again, we were really focusing on, because of the connectivity with Pinehurst South. Pinehurst South, I mean, I've been here since 1972. Pinehurst South and Mr. Senator Harris, he was very motivational on developing Pinehurst South. It's never really caught a hold, and we're hoping in our thinking that this residential component maybe is that missing component to really bolster life into this area of Southern Pines. There's been cafes, there's been restaurants that were there for a little while and didn't quite survive. We would hope that something like this would allow them to survive and encourage that type of mixed use between residential and commercial. So that was kind of our thinking in reading the comprehensive long-range plan draft on the 2019 version, that was our connectivity to the comprehensive long-range plans. And again, as Mr. Carpenter said, the more we read it, the more we felt like we fit what the plan was, as well as met the need for what the community was asking for.
Thank you.
Can I respond one more time to the sidewalks? We do sidewalks to nowhere all the time, but, I get it, because every time we do these sidewalks, eventually they're going to connect. So when we talk about the live, work, and the pedestrian traffic and that foot traffic, and if we're able to connect Pinehurst South and breathe that life into that part of the community, commercial-wise, and we've got this residential component, I'll bet you those sidewalks start showing up in that commercial sector, because that redevelopment opportunity, they're going to be looking for that foot traffic. So they're going to want to connect to a residential community. So I think that sidewalk component will eventually have that connectivity, but it's got to start somewhere, which is, in a lot of cases, the sidewalks to nowhere. But I think the overall plan is almost like the greenways that we're building. Eventually, Pinehurst, Southern Pines, that greenway is probably eventually going to connect. I think there's a grand plan. I know there is. So we can only hope it all comes together. So I wanted to also respond to the sidewalks. So thank you very much for all y'all's time and listening to these thoughts.
I think it's time that we close the public hearing, adjourn the public hearing, and return to our regular session so we can have some deliberation and come up to a decision. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We're now back in regular session for discussion and deliberation about the question before us. And I don't want to take anybody in any particular order unless you want to raise your hand and go first. Nobody's raised their hand to go. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly.
I appreciate all the work that goes into this, and I appreciate the effort and from the part of the developer and from the design firm, and I know it's not inexpensive to do these kind of things. My challenge with it is just that it conflicts with the long-range plan. And I think there are other options that could be worked on this particular parcel that might be a little bit more amenable or closer, or some sort of combination, but I haven't heard anything that convinces me we ought to conflict with what the long-range plan is.
Anyone else?
I think it's a fabulous project. I think there's a need for that in this community. I think the price for the house, I mean, it's a 175 a square foot. God bless you if you can build for that today. I can't. But when I first looked at this, my idea, my thought on it was this would be fine if they were going to four-lane Route 5 in the next year or two. I expect it's going to take you some time to build this out. 5 would get caught up with it. It's not a big problem. The traffic to me is an issue. I think it is a fabulous process, Marcel. I really do. I agree with you. There aren't a whole lot of places in this town that you could possibly do this. I like all your reasons for doing it. It's just an awful lot of traffic entering out onto Route 5. And I can easily see, I'm 80 years old, but I can easily see in my lifetime traffic from the bridge backing up to Food Lion someday. And as much as I think this would enhance the village and our style of life here, that traffic problem is what I kept hearing when we were doing the long-range comprehensive plan from people that one of their top 2-3 issues is traffic in this town. But I love your project.
I can tell that I think there's going to be some changes on Highway 5 with these subdivisions and the elementary school, and it would be nice to sort of see how that all pans out before we approve another big project on Highway 5. But I'd like the innovation hub that they were talking about putting in that area. It's zoned that way. It was the intent of the long-range plan, and I like that for Pinehurst. I like your project. I think there is a need for what you're developing. I just wish it wasn't on this piece of property.
Anyone else? I'll throw my 2 cents in that I believe that the 2010 long-range plan and the 2019 long-range plan, along with the special area plan or small area plan for this particular site, carries more weight than this proposal does. I believe there's potential for development as described in both the 2010 and 2019 long-range plan that includes businesses, retail, and a component of residential to look more like a PUD than a PRD. So I guess in essence, I would say that this application is not consistent with either our current plan or the proposed 2019 plan to be adopted for both traffic reasons and planning reasons. Any other comment? Are we ready to make a motion to vote on the application? If so, please let me hear one. Before we make the vote on the application, we need to do 2 stages. First of all, we have to make a motion and second and a vote on the consistency statement, and then on either approval or denial.
Understood and ready. I move that the Planning and Zoning Board adopt the statement of consistency and authorize its chairman to execute the document as the proposed zoning map amendment is not consistent with the 2010 Comprehensive Long-Range Village Plan as described in the staff memo prepared by Alex Cameron dated 25 September 2019. Not achieving goals in accordance with the comprehensive plan is considered unreasonable and not in the best interest of the public.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a roll call vote. Mr. Roberts?
Support option 2.
Mr. Schreiber?
Support option 2.
Mrs. Burnett?
I support option 2.
Mrs. Racine?
Support option 2.
Mrs. Latham?
Support option 2.
Mr. Kelly?
I made the motion, so I guess I support it.
I have to do it for the record.
Understood, yes.
Okay. That's unanimous, that the plan has been determined to be not consistent with the 2010 Comprehensive Long-Range Plan. Now we need a motion to either approve or deny.
I make a motion to recommend denial to the Pinehurst Village Council of the proposed zoning map amendment.
We have a motion by Mrs. Rothstein, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schreiber. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to do a roll call vote also here. Mr. Roberts?
Support that.
Mr. Schreiber?
Favor.
Mrs. Burnett?
Favor.
Ms. Latham?
Agreed.
I agree
Mr. Kelly?
I agree with the recommendation for denial to the village council.
That vote is also unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We don't have any general business to discuss or go over at this time. Our next meeting date will be November 7th. And can the members present tell me whether they will be in attendance at that meeting? Who will attend the November 7th meeting? Everybody's going to be here. November 7th. 7-11 reversed. Thank you. I have a motion to adjourn.
That's our regular meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Kelly to adjourn, seconded.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Burnett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.